Hey everyone, and welcome to my Stamina Nightblade video for the Harrowstorm patch. This video is going to cover three things. The first thing is gear setups across multiple different scenarios. Second thing is a trial dummy pass to give you a feel for the rotation. And the third thing is where Warfire is going to show us how to execute the Stamina Nightblade rotation in a raid perfectly. Hope you enjoy. So in this first part of the video, I'm going to go over some different setups that I like to use across multiple trials and kind of give you a feel for the basis around which I'll create most of my setups specific to each different raid. So if I come to my general tab, trials for bosses, this is kind of your standard stack and whack. So what you'll see on the trial dummy pass is what I use here, besides the fact that I'll be using incapacitating strike on the back bar instead of ballista for the little bit of added sustain on the dummy. However, as you'll notice, I've got ballista on quite a few of these setups. It is a lot better to open with than an incap if you have the ultimate. Typically the reason for this is you can get increased damage with your ballista when there's a major vuln applied at the start of the fight. So you get quite a lot of burst from that. Same sort of scenario here, but instead of having rending slashes, we have Camo Hunter. So Camo Hunter can provide you with minor berserk if there's no combat prayer available, so it's super useful there. Otherwise, the other skills are kind of straightforward. For trash, I like to use a Master's 2H. The shield from Brawler is kind of hard to pass up in raid scenarios, so I go with that. NMA, Locky and Masters is the way forward for sure. Reaper's Mark is a great skill in trash as well. It's always nice to put it on and add typically one of the low health adds that's sort of around each of the trash packs, particularly in Sunspire. There's lots of these little archers and stuff that stand out, and they usually get chained in and die very quickly, which will give you 5 seconds of major berserk. One of the particularly unique setups is Bobo setup. This is mainly for AS. Quick comment around this is if you're still killing minis in AS, so you have to put the poison or the Nightblade boss down, I would probably highly advise against taking stamina in there, just because the cleave is so bad on both Nightblade and Necro, which are going to be your two top choices in there anyway. So here I have Mark on my bar. This is again for the spheres for major berserk, and as a result I'm using Zogvin Lucky with Crags, and that shouldn't be Master Lock, but it should be another crit piece, so Slimecrawl for example. The reason for me using Zogvin here and not NMA is that bar space is kind of tight if you use Reaper's Mark. So if you're the one Nightblade who unfortunately doesn't get to use Mark, then for sure put Rearming Trap here, or Barb Trap should I say now, and use New Moon instead of Zogvin on the front bar. 4-man content. So this is kind of mainly for dungeons. I'm not really doing too much in Black Rose Prison and DSA right now, but had a little think about what I would use, and I guess what I was using in dungeons can be applied for or across the board, shall I say. So again, similar sort of skill setup, typically not going to have combat pair provided to you, so Camo Hunter's great here as well, apart from I'm using Two Fang Snake and Lockistes. Two Fang for me is probably the best second set I can think of in 4-man content. Advancing Yakida is also a great option as well, particularly because you can front bar that set and then have Lucky on the body, which is sometimes pretty nice as well. In recent videos that Warfire has posted, or should I say a recent video that Warfire posted, we did the triple achievement, or should I say the no death hard mode and speedrun in one of the new dungeons which you can go and see. And on almost all the bosses, it was so much safer for us to go Bobo on our stamina characters. So I do advise, if you're kind of looking at doing those sort of achievements, Bobo is really great. So here I had TFS and Zogvin. Again, you could kind of replace Zogvin with Loki, but because we're sort of running around all over the place and we're not so stacked when we're on Bobo, Loki wasn't so great in 4-man content. And then just for trash, kind of like to use dual wield on or in dungeons. This typically the trash is a lot less dangerous, and therefore you can get away with dual wield. So whirling blades here instead of reverse slice on the other trash setup. Reaper's Mark still stays, and I've also got Caltrops, which is AoE fracture. Those of you with a keen eye will notice that on a lot of these setups, I have a Marslock's Pauldron, and the reason why I have one heavy is because of the following screenshots. So what I want to show you is, this is the current setup that I'm using. So Shadow Wonderstone with 18 points in health, 46 in stamina, and 1 heavy shoulder piece, and these are the stats it gives you. So we have 15.4k health, 32.5k stam, and the important thing here really is the 1,843 stam recovery, and then the other difference you might see is a little bit of crit difference versus the old setup. So this is what I'm currently running, and this is what I was running before. So 64 points in stam with the RTM takeaway broth. It gives me 16.3k health, which, at least for the content that I was doing, was not necessary. I have slightly less stamina, 32.1k, quite a lot less stam recovery, and 1.5% more crit. So essentially what I'm giving up is I'm giving up a little bit of stam, a lot of recovery to gain a little bit of crit, and it really isn't worth it. I've tested both quite a lot, and the extra stam, or the extra stam recovery, should I say, is so good for bash weaving. You can add another 1 or 2k to your bash DPS, which is way more than that little bit of extra crit is going to give you. So that's why we go with this setup. So last couple of things regarding generic setups, etc. Champion points. These I don't really change between trials. The only one I consider changing these for is possibly AS. Otherwise, this is kind of what I'd go for. Master at Arms 66, 28 in Thalm, 61 precise, 59 piercing, and 56 in mighty. Now, Stanblade does actually have, or should I say, Surprise Attack actually has a secondary effect that removes some of the boss's resistances. I think it's 5%. So you could actually take this down to 55, and then bump, or 54, let's say, and bump that up to 66. Maybe you want to move some in Thalm. The only problem with that is, in a longer fight, you may not have that surprise attack debuff up for the whole of execute, and you really want to ensure that the execute part of your fight is as optimized as possible. So for somewhere like Yolnahkrin hard mode, for example, when the boss flies away and lands for the final time, he's at 25% already. So for that whole execute phase, you won't actually have that that penetration debuff if you're the only Nightblade in group. Maybe you have a tank that's a Nightblade applying it, but apart from that, I would stick with the 59 in piercing for now. If you need to get to max pen with without minor fracture, for example, or without Taurugs, what you can always do is on all these setups that I have, instead of having Nirn and Sharp front bar, you can always go to double Sharp, for example. It's just a dungeon setup that I have with AY on, but double Sharp is absolutely fine if you need to get to pen cap. So that covers everything for the gears and general setup part of the video. Second part of the video is going to be a trial dummy pass. Two quick things to mention. The first is that the setup that I made with a master's bow for the previous patches, which can be found on Lico's channel, and I'll also leave a link in the description, is still very effective and possibly actually even more effective than this maelstrom bow rotation that I'm going to show now. Reason that I swapped to this rotation is basically it kind of feels like old Nightblade, where you had Endless Hail, Caltrops, Poison Injection as almost like a set 3 on the back bar, and then casting Shade and Rearming Trap off cooldown. Along with that, the damage is pretty much exactly the same. So for that reason, I've chosen to use this Maelstrom bow setup for this patch. Second thing is the next pass is not perfect whatsoever. Could definitely be improved upon. I think you could probably do 90k on Nightblade this patch on the trial dummy. I missed a few live attacks, and I even forgot to start the fight with minor force. However, it's still over 88k. Nightblade is in not a great position this patch in terms of DPS, but I'll show you later why it's a lot more competitive in raids. So enjoy the dummy pass.
The lights surround my eyes, they fill me up, we're all here for a reason, to spread our love, no fear. We'll dance until we die, our hearts are filled with cheer. We're all here for a reason, we're all here for a reason. Call it what you want to,
So that was the trial dummy pass for the Stamina Nightblade in Harrowstorm. The next part of the video, so part 3, is for me the most important part because this is actually about your raid DPS and also why the numbers that you see on a trial dummy will almost certainly not reflect Stamina Nightblade performance in a raid. So Warfire has kindly let me borrow one of his clips from our Unlimited Anime VAA progression. You can go see the full run on his channel for the world record that we achieved. So this is a Valariel pass that Warfire has kindly let me borrow from AA. I'm going to sort of let the video run, but possibly pause it at one point to go over a couple of things. So one thing you can do here as well, which we didn't do at this point in time, but you can see that his health drops kind of low here after jumping off the side. Actually, this is very specific to this boss, but if there's a blood altar down, you can actually get Mage Slayer without having to use an orb off the bat from your Lucky Steez proc. So that's always something to look out for if you're ever score pushing this trial. So first thing he's going to do here is open up with a ballista. You can see the live DPS on the left, as he can pretty easily keep up with the necros this part of the fight. Other thing to notice is that sustain is really good here. You'll see the bash DPS afterwards, but also stand pool never really goes low. So he casts an incap quite early here, and there's actually no shade up at this time. However, if you can fit in one more cast of an incap at the cost of desyncing some of your dots, then it's better because he now knows, just based on the pace of the fight, that he's going to get one more incap in before execute starts, which is the important thing. You can also see when bashing is prioritized here. So bashing and execute is better than bashing after an incap, which is better than bashing anywhere else as well. So again, using that incap as early as possible to make sure he squeezes as many out of this boss fight as possible. So I'm going to pause it here, and actually I'm going to go back a little bit. So you can kind of see what he does before execute. So this is the most important part. So setting up execute is super important. You can't just cast your dots at the same percent for every boss. You kind of need to judge the pace of the fight and also the DPS of your group. So knowing that and being able to judge when the boss is going to hit 25% is really important, because if you're only going to cast dots once more, so this boss is at 34% here, so it's casted Endless Hail for the last time. You want as much uptime of those dots in execute rather than before execute. That's going to be a significant DPS gain because those dots are then going to be affected by your triple bloodthirsty jewelry. So if I let this run now, so he's got consuming trap, poison injection up. He's holding his incap here, so he has it already. He's just holding it a little bit. He's refreshing barb trap for minor force. So then, as soon as he hits 25, incap and then killer's blade spam for the whole time. Now there's a couple of people died here, so this executes a little bit slower than it possibly should have been. But you can see the DPS on the left hand side, and the Nightblade is more than capable of keeping up with the Necros. So I just really want to quickly touch on a couple of things that you can see in the CMX from that pass. So first thing to note, starting from the bottom going up, that single cast of Ballista at the start of the fight, almost 4.4k DPS, so almost 4% of his DPS from that single ult, so hopefully here you can see that it's definitely worth. The bash damage, almost 5.2k DPS from bashing, 32 bashes in a minute long fight, and he actually had plenty of stamina uh, to do more. So you can kind of see the potential of this build in terms of the sustain and the stam recovery. Some pretty awful crits on Assassin's Scourge, but it was made up by the Killer's Blade crits at the top of the DPS list, which is the important thing to note actually. And in almost all these fights, I understand that someone died, so it was a slightly longer execute here, but in almost all boss fights, if you set up your execute correctly, Killer's Blade is going to be way higher than your light attack damage, which is why in a raid, Stam Nightblade does so much better than it does on a raid dummy. Because if you go back through the video and look at my raid dummy Parse, light attacks are above Killer's Blades a little bit still. But on this pass and in a raid, Killer's Blade is normally way above your light attack damage. So to sort of conclude this whole video, I just wanted to touch on a few things that I think Stamblade could do with. So his DPS is pretty good right now, particularly in a raid environment. I'd love to see the crit passive buffed a little bit more. Ever since we went from 2 daggers to axe dagger, we lost a little bit of our crit, which really affects our passes. We have hard hitting single target or single cast abilities like bow proc and killer's blade, and low crits on those really impact the DPS. So a little buff to that would be pretty nice. And then apart from that, I think it's in a decent spot. So I hope you enjoyed the video, everyone. I hope this shows you or helps prove to people why Stamblade is a little bit more effective in raid than it seems to be on a dummy. And I'll catch you again next time.